This is the Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, Wednesday, March 28, 1973, interviewing Miss Jane Scheerer at the Wabash Carnegie Public Library. Jane, let's go in first of all into your family background and tell me about yourself and your parents and schooling and up until the time you went to work.
My father was Ernest Scheerer, and he came from Huntington County. He was born in Huntington County. My mother was Anna Baylor, and she was born in Wabash County, but her older brothers and sisters were born in Switzerland. I had all my primary and secondary education in the Wabash City school system and went to work directly from my high school education.
Mm-hmm. What was your first job then?
My first job was, I neglected to mention that I do have one brother who was a dentist in Honolulu. My first job was in the payroll department at Honeywell, computing payroll and variances and this sort of thing.
And why don't you just develop your work career at Honeywell, and then we'll ask.
From that I went to a job in general stenography, actually doing all the stenographic work for all of the men in all of the departments because our office was very small at the time. In 1946, when I went to work for Honeywell, they were in the process of converting from wartime to peacetime production, and we're more or less an experimental lab. And so there were only a few people. For example, our engineering department consisted of two men, who were Harold Brackett and Jim Davis, and methods department consisted of one man, Walter McClintock, and so on down the line. And I did the stenographic work for these two people, plus the payroll department, the accounting department, and what was left over of that could be accomplished by the girl who worked at that time in the purchasing department. And very shortly after I went to work, in fact, when I first came to work, Mr. Honeywell's stenographer, not his secretary, but his stenographer, had been ill and out for quite some time, and she was the individual that took all the shorthand for him with his business correspondence and with his personal correspondence, and that had to do with building of the foundation building. So he needed someone to do his shorthand work, and I was selected, it was quite an honor for me to be selected as an 18-year-old to take his dictation. As such, I was able to see a lot of the things that he was doing at the time in resuming construction on the Honeywell Foundation building, which had been stopped for quite some time due to lack of materials during the war. And he was at this point in time picking special items for placement in the building, in particular niches in the walls, such things as pictures and wall hangings and vases, and he was having the light fixtures designed, each light fixture especially designed for its particular place in the building, all the furniture designed especially for its particular place in the building. He was gathering a collection of artwork. Basically, he was a great fan of Homer Davison, an Indiana artist, a Hoosier artist, and he had many of Davison's paintings in the building and in particular spots. He also had most of the interior decorating in the canteen area and in the downstairs dining room areas done by local artists. The canteen for the high school students, and it was in fact done by a high school student at that time. It was called the Apache, I think the Apache Den or something like that. And all of the figures, which were Indians, of course, were done by a girl by the name at that time of Joan Crumley. And Joan graduated from Wabash High School in 1950. This was these paintings she did at the time she was in high school, and I think shortly thereafter. And Norma Abernathy of Peru, was the lady who did the paintings in the room between the club room and the canteen and many other areas of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And we did such things as, or he did such things as select at this point in time china and silver and the candelabra and all this sort of thing, and was having tables made. The type of folding tables he wanted were not available on the market, and so he had them made to his own specification. And so the metal work for the tables was done in the Honeywell factory tool room by the foreman and the men who worked there. And then he bought the top specially built from some company who specialized in this type of work.
What kind of a man was Mr. Honeywell to work for at that time, this period in his life?
Well, he was an exceptional person. He was a perfectionist by nature, an absolute perfectionist, but he was a very understanding person, a very human type of an individual, and very friendly with all of his employees. I think probably he knew all of them by a first name basis and called them such. He was a very easy man to work with, very understanding, and as an 18-year-old I found that out very quickly, because we were working with all of these contacts that he had, plus the corporation executives in Minneapolis with whom he had been working for many, many years. And to have somebody 18 years old come in and try to pick up this type of thing was, he had to be an understanding man to be able to take this.
Was the corporate load pretty heavy at this period of his life?
Yes, it was.
It was still heavy. Why?
Yes, well, this was a period in time when they were making acquisitions of other companies. There was an acquisition in Chicago. There was an acquisition in Goshen, Indiana, or somewhere in that area, and there were other corporate acquisitions of like or different products to diversify our total production.
Was there a reason why they were trying to diversify at that time?
I think I really can't say, because I was a little bit too young to be too deeply involved in the activities of a corporation at that time or to understand. It quite possibly could have been because there was so much war production during the Second World War, and it could very well be that this was a transition into a more diversified type of business than the regulator business that you think of as being a Honeywell or a Minneapolis regulator company product. We were diversifying in areas, although the products that they did buy, or the companies that they did buy, were of controlling nature. They were not necessarily the home heat system regulating type of thing.
Was the union getting a toehold at this time?
Oh no, not at this time. In 1946, we had an independent local union with a very cooperative working relationship with management at that point, and this continued so until in the way late 50s.
Who was Mr. Honeywell's right-hand man at the plant in the 40s when you were, late 40s when you were there?
Howard Worth.
Yeah. And how was their relationship? And
well, it was really great. From the stories that I had heard, he was more or less, Mr. Worth was more or less a protege of Mr. Honeywell's, and I think much of his business experience was gained from Mr. Honeywell. Much of the experience that he thought a great deal of and was very thankful for later on. Mr. Honeywell kind of took him under his wing as a young man. He came out of high school and went to work at the plant as a draftsman right out of high school, and in fact worked part-time after school as a high school student as a draftsman in the plant or in the office. But then he went to college to Purdue and worked summers for his brother in Michigan, in Constantine, Michigan. And when he came back, he did have a job offer at another place, and Mr. Honeywell almost took him off the train as he was leaving town to take his new job, to take a job with Mr. Honeywell in the plant locally. He had thought that highly of him as a high school student and as a post-high school student in the work that he had done in that period of time. And so from that point on, I think he more or less took him under his wing, and their working relationship was very good.
Who were some of the others that Mr. Honeywell was working with at that time in the factory, closely associated with?
Well, I would say at that point in time, possibly the the most closely associated people were the people that were in charge of the various departments. Bus Martin was the M.L. Martin of Peru was the tool room foreman, and I can remember a man by the name of a man we called Lem Jacobs, who was the inspection foreman, and Mr. Brackett and Mr. Davis, who were the engineering department at that time, and Mr. Mullendore, who was machine shop foreman. And there were others such as Charlie Keppel, who was in the finishing department. And right offhand, I can't think of. There must have been others, but
Who was handling the sales in those days?
Minneapolis handled our sales. As such, Wabash has really never had a sales department, and so all of our products were marketed through the Minneapolis Marketing Division or Minneapolis Sales Division. As a division, all of our products were marketed in this manner. And basically, we didn't have an actual design engineering group until possibly in the 50s. And we did design a first or second item that were of our own design. Prior to that time, most of the items, well, in my history, that is, since 1946, were designed in Minneapolis and came to us from Minneapolis.
Where were the factories located back then?
When I went to work in 1946, the factory was at 119 West Canal, and it was an old building that had previously been, as I understood, a soap factory many years before, but had been a Honeywell plant for many years. And they were in the process of putting an addition between the then existing plant and a building which was known as the mill. This was a grain mill that was owned and operated by Mr. Honeywell's father, Mr. Sanford Honeywell. And the addition that was being built between the existing manufacturing facility and the mill. Subsequent to that time, there was another addition put on the west end of the mill because the mill was a more or less sacred place. We didn't disturb the mill exterior. The interior was reinforced and used for storage and this sort of thing, but the exterior was not defaced in any way, shape, or form. The plant then expanded from that location to right across the street into a building that was known as the Talbot Building, and this was probably because it was owned by Harold Talbot, but it was prior to that time a Ford agency. And the damper production, or our first sheet metal production, went into this building at that time. It was about 1949, I think, about 3 years after I went there, and continued to expand into what was known as the Slummer buildings, and those buildings are still standing next to the Slummer sheet metal shop on West Canal Street, and they're now occupied by Robin Hood Furniture Store. We went over to Huntington Street for one of our products, to what was called the 513 building, basically because a man had run a battery shop there called the 513. I suppose the address was 513 Battery Shop. And there was an item produced there. The Honeywell Foundation had a warehouse on West Canal Street that we occupied for the purpose of making sheet metal items. And from that location, we shipped the largest item that has ever gone out of the Wabash plant. It took a complete railroad flat car to ship that item out of the plant.
What was that?
It was a very large panel, as I remember. I remember it was quite an exciting day the day this thing was shipped, and it took several days to crate it in wood and to find the routing for it, because in fact it was too tall to even go under a lot of the underpasses that the railroads had to pass through, so it had to go by some circuitous route to reach its destination.
Well, what did your business career take? What turn did it take after?
Well, mine, after I was in the general stenographic area, I was promoted then to the purchasing department and was stenographer for R.J. McDaniel, and incidentally, he was one of the men who worked with Mr. Honeywell from way back when he even almost had his own plumbing shop many years ago. And Mr. McDaniel was purchasing agent for Honeywell for 44 years. So his period of time went way back, and I worked for him for 5 years. And then in the latter years of my association with him, I also assisted him in buying small parts and this sort of thing, stock warehouse items. And from that, I went to the manager's office. Mr. Worth was still manager, and I was there from about 1953 until 1962, about 9.5 years, I would guess.
And what was your...
I was secretary to the manager of operations. And at that point in time, then went to the personnel department as personnel assistant or personnel administrator.
And then?
And that is the job I still hold.
Right. In Mr. Worth's time, what happened at the end of his career that after Mr. Honeywell obviously left the company for health reasons, and then do you feel that Mr. Worth was shuffled aside by the corporate group, or?
I really have no idea what the purpose was. I don't know that he even knew what the reason for it was. I have my own ideas about it, because he was very strongly a Wabash man, and he was very interested in keeping Wabash, the community of Wabash, a busy place, and the people in this community employed. And I think the corporation probably at that time was in a state of change. We had had new corporate, when Mr. Honeywell was out of the honorary chairman of the board position, and the officers moved up with age until we had a much younger management. In fact, I think at the time the president at that time took over, he was in his early 50s, or maybe even late 40s, I'm not certain. But his concept of operation was entirely different. The first thing that he did was to completely shake up the field sales organization. And men who had been in particular offices, for example, there had been a man in Indianapolis office for many, many years. And he was sent clear over on the East Coast somewhere to some very small office, and he had been office manager in Indianapolis for many, many years. And so this was his first step. And it was just probably a different concept of management, a different operating concept. It was not the old human operating concept. We were moving from the humanity to the numerical employee system about this time.
Were you Mr. Worth's secretary when this was transpiring? Were you his?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. This happened about, probably in the late, oh no, I don't mean late 50s.
Would have been late 50s.
It had to be, late 50s. It would have to have been around late 50s.
And then he was transferred to Clearwater, right?
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg area. Did he ever express to you any dissatisfaction with the move or anything?
Not necessarily any dissatisfaction, because he had intended to retire there anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he was quite confused by the whole thing, because he had been, not very long before the transfer, had been commended for his outstanding performance in the local plant, and the fact that the plant was a profitable operation. And he had come back from a meeting during which he was publicly recognized for this reason. And so I think he was quite shocked when the change came about. Mm-hmm. So, but not so far as how he felt about it. I'm sure he was disappointed, because this was his hometown, mm-hmm. and his wife's hometown, and he had been here all his life and had made a growing thing of our plant. And so I think there possibly was some hurt involved, but he was not a man to discuss this type of thing. Mm-hmm. He was a total businessman, and these type of things you don't discuss freely, I would guess.
Did Bob Ensler then and Dwyer came in from Freeport that took Mr. Worth's?
Bob Ensler came first, and he brought with him 4 other men.
Mm-hmm. Did you stay on as, what was your position when they came in then?
I was still secretary to the manager at that time, and about 3 months after Mr. Ansler came, there was a fellow in our personnel department who was on his way out the door, and his position was opening up, and it was offered me by the personnel manager. And having had two totally different concepts of operating from the manager's office, it was very difficult for me to adjust to my new operational concept. Before that time, I had a great deal of responsibility. Had done a lot of building, office arrangement, and furniture purchasing, equipment purchasing, even some of the facility purchasing for the new plants at the Bond Street area.
Yeah.
The concept of my job changed considerably. The responsibility was much less. And
Less?
Much less, because I don't believe that he even knew what I did. I, at that time, was administering all salary and taking care of all of his things, besides taking care of I had a clerical pool under me, and I had a night shift, and all this sort of thing. Any special projects that came along were mine to handle. And I dealt, for example, with the telephone company and having the original installation put in the new factory and office building, factory and offices. Dealt with them in buying the equipment and arranging where the switching equipment would be and all this sort of thing. So the responsibility that I had held previously was much greater than a normal secretary would handle. And I think probably from his former experience, the secretary in his former location did not do this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And consequently, my operating, to me it was a retrogression on my own part.
Were you discouraged at this point in your professional career?
Exceptionally so, yes.
Yeah.
Because it was altogether different way of operating, and I wasn't just exactly sure which direction I was going. Mm-hmm. And it appeared to be going the wrong way to suit me. Mm-hmm. And so when the job was offered me in the personnel area, which would again afford me a lot of responsibility, and again a job on which I was basically functioning under my own, on my own, not under somebody's direct supervision. Yeah. I was more or less free to operate so long as my particular responsibilities were capably handled.
As you look back in retrospect now, would you say that the decisions were, although appeared wrong at that time, were right in the long run, or what would you say?
Well, I can't really say, because at the time immediately preceding this, we seemed to be growing. And since that time, we haven't grown. In fact, we have gone way down. Mm-hmm. Our employment from a high in 1960 of 1,250 people. We are just now beginning to come back up anywhere in size at all, and we have some perhaps 350 to 375 people now. Yeah. We have had a lot of change, but we don't seem to grow larger. Mm-hmm. At this point in time, where prior to that time we were growing.
In talking to other Honeywell employees on this same subject, some had the opinion that they were going to close the plant, and others had the opinion that they would never close the plant. What was your feeling, your personal feeling?
I know the rumor was rampant in the community that the plant was closed. However, I personally felt that it was almost inconceivable that the company took the name of a man who was one of the founders of the company, and this was his hometown. It seemed almost inconceivable to me that they would close the local operation. Mm-hmm. Because of this fact, if for no other reason. Mm-hmm. The fact that Wabash was Honeywell, and Honeywell was an integral part of the community. Mm-hmm. And I personally feel so long as this operation can show that it is an operable and profit-making facility, that it will remain here. Even though we are out of the way. This is one of our big disadvantages. We are out of the way. We're off the beaten path of for example, transportation. It's difficult to get to Wabash, to and from Wabash. And this has been one of our big drawbacks. because most of the other locations are within metropolitan areas, and we are one of the very few that are in small offbeat towns or small off-path towns.
Well, couldn't you offset that with the advantage of, say, a lower labor cost or something of that nature?
Well, possibly at one time we could have done that, and I suppose to this day we can in some areas. In other areas that is not so. It's just like any other industry, national industry. A locally owned industry has a greater advantage in this area than a national industry, because a national industry has certain standards, and they have comparing unions, and they have transferring professionals, and this is not really an advantage to us from this standpoint.
Did you remember when they decided to move the plant from the Canal Street area to the Bond Street?
Yes, I was.
What were the circumstances?
Well, I was in on that in the beginning. When the Bond Street plant was built, let's put it this way, Mr. Honeywell had a dream. The property on which the plant is now located was owned by the Honeywell Foundation. It had been a stone quarry many years before, and Mr. Honeywell had owned this with the dream that someday he would build a plant there. In fact, he had the plans already conceived in his own mind. It was to have been a brick front plant in a U shape in the front, which would have housed offices and the possible assembly areas, with the building to extend toward the west for the heavier manufacturing. It could have been 1 story, 2 story, or whatever. But I remember seeing pictures of the plant that he did conceive for that location. So it was only a natural thing that when the time did come when we needed expansion area, and we were able to impress corporation management with the fact that we did need better manufacturing facilities, because the Canal Street plant was actually one of the poorest manufacturing facilities so far as convenience and workability were concerned, because of the different levels of the plant and how many areas it was broken up into. When the decision was made to move out there, it was basically to bring all of our sheet metal operations into one plant, so that the sheet metal could go into that area and be produced into whatever small parts. Our punch press, our whole machine shop went to that area, and all of our things like punch presses and automatic and hand screw machines and mills and this sort of thing, as well as the production of dampers, and as well as the production of sheet metal panels and this sort of thing. So it was an attempt to put under one roof what had then up to that point been located in probably 4 other buildings over and around the city. This would eliminate the transportation problems, the stock transportation problems, eliminate part of our trucking problems back and forth, and stocking problems, would greatly enhance the efficiency of the operation. So this was the original intent, and also expansion purposes for a new sheet metal item at that time, the electronic air cleaner, and then very quickly added after that was the charcoal filter. These were for commercial installations instead of
both of these have been phased out, or they're still?
I believe that the air cleaner is manufactured on a small basis at some other location. I'm not positive.
Did the union, did the international union come in at about this time?
This, at the time of all of our expansion, when we were having a number of government contracts, and when our production was increasing and our population was increasing, in fact had doubled and tripled, and we were running on 24-hour day shifts, 24-hour day plan, 3 shifts a day. This is when the field is most lucrative for such activity.
What's the background, to your knowledge, on the company union then going into the international union?
The only thing I know about it is the company union was organized before I came to the company, and the president was the same president all the time I was there until the affiliation with the International. And it was a small company, if you want to call it company union. I can't say that it was exactly that because there were negotiations each year, and they had their differences of opinion just as you do with an affiliated union. However, they were not as great and they were not so difficult to solve. Usually they could come to a meeting of the minds and within a very short distance, a length of time, and there were no threats on either side. It was much less costly to the people there, and for the most part they were satisfied with the way things went because they were assured they had job security, which was a big thing I don't believe they realized until after they had affiliated with the International, because before that time they would be switched back and forth from one job to another. If their job were partially or completely phased out, they were put in another area, and this was very simple to do. The company just moved them into another area, and they kept the same rate that they were making before, and they were assured of keeping their job. We had no layoffs as such, except at the termination of government contracts, and these were quite sizable because when you got a government contract and were obligated to meet delivery requirements within a certain specified time, you obviously had to increase your workforce. Your current workforce could not handle this increased production. And so when this happened and then a government contract was terminated, it was impossible to immediately get in another item to hold these people, to keep their jobs for them, or keep a job for them. So these were the first large layoff problems that we did have. Mm-hmm. But this is no longer the case because a person's job security is not as great now, I don't believe, as it was then.
The International obviously got recognition and had a vote, and they were the representative of the worker at the plant then.
They were the second union to have come in, second or third union to have come in for a representation election.
The first ones failed?
Yes, the first ones failed.
Get a majority and to represent them.
Right.
What was the relationship between management and the worker? Did it take a dramatic turn, do you think, after the International was recognized?
Of necessity, I think. I don't know specifically between management and the laborer. I know what effect it had on me because I had many, many friends who worked in the plant at the time, and the immediate feeling was that they no longer could talk to me because I was a part of management. Mm-hmm. And this was a kind of a hurt thing, and I think many of us who were longtime employees and older employees felt this very strongly because we had all been one big family prior to this time, and because of the fact that they were attempting to do something that was so totally different, if these people had to belong or become a part of their organization, this automatically exempted them from too close an association with anybody in management. Therefore, the relations were, for a period of time, extremely strained. And I felt this. Now, I don't know about the men in management because I don't know. I was not with them when they were in the plant. At times, I know that I've had older employees say to me that nobody in management came through the plant and spoke to them like they used to. And there was reason for this, obviously. This was probably showing favoritism at that point in time. It was looked upon as showing favoritism, where it really wasn't. They were just longtime friends. And after this affiliation, then it became a matter of showing favoritism to certain people, which it was not intended to do at all.
Do you think if Honeywell had remained relatively local, quite similar to Ford Meter Box, that these union problems possibly would never have happened?
No, I can't say that.
That's an iffy question.
No, I can't say that. I really don't know. I don't know what brought the union, and I don't know what started the force behind it. Undoubtedly, it was somebody from some outside location. unions have a way of trying to organize all of the plants of any given corporation if they are able to do so. And the one with which our people are affiliated now had already done this to the General Electric Corporation, and when General Electric has a strike, the whole corporation practically is on strike. It's the same way in the auto industry. If one of the Ford Motor Company plants go out, well, the entire corporation goes out, and this is a great tool for a union to work with at the negotiating table. And so I can only guess, because I'm not that familiar with the mechanics of this type of thing.
Did the union start out being affiliated with the Minneapolis plant at the same contract time and so forth, or?
I don't believe so. I think Minneapolis had been organized many years before, many years before ours. And I don't believe, and I'm almost sure that they are not now the same union that we are, the same affiliation.
Who was plant manager when they finally recognized the International?
Mr. Worth was plant
He was
manager.
still plant manager, yeah.
He was plant manager from 44 until 62.
What was his feelings?
He had very mixed emotions. I think probably a little bit of hurt involved, because it was an indication to him that the people were not satisfied, and this was the thing that he worked hardest at, is keeping his people satisfied and keeping them on the job. And he was very dedicated to this type of work. This was his whole life, in fact, is to keep our operation profitable operation, and as well as taking care of his hometown people. And I think it was a little bit of a salt in the wound when this affiliation attempt came along, but it was obvious that it was not the people who had been there for quite some time, because these people, and I think part of the problem was that these people wouldn't even go to meetings to vote, or to even talk about it. They didn't want to get mixed up in it. You know, it was kind of an unusual situation. The people who had been there the longest and who had the most to lose, actually, by the whole situation did not want to get mixed up in the messiness of the thing and alienate other people with whom they were working. So it was basically a lot of new employees that were recruited for this purpose, for the purpose of affiliating the local with an international.
You know, there's a odd situation, I think, that ran over everyone's mind that wasn't an employee of Honeywell's and was not on the inside, and that was the sudden departure of Howard Williams and Charlie Keppel and Bud McClintock, and I could name about probably 10 or 12 in middle management at that time that were, well, I shouldn't say they were thrown out in the street, but they departed hastily after many years with Honeywell's, and in many cases a long association with the plant. What happened there? What was the reasoning there?
I have no idea, other than new management concept again, because this was after Mr. Ensler came that all this happened. This was like perhaps a year to a year and a half after he came that all these terminations were effected. In fact, there were so many that at one point in time in about 1964, when he came, I think we had something like 675 employees. This was in 1962. And when by 2 years later, we had 79 total hourly and salaried employees. 18 of us were in the office, and the balance were in the plant. And this represented a cutback in female population in the plant from several hundred to only 5. And obviously, I mean, this was over a period of years now, but in just a very short time, it was a phasing out of most of the items that we had made. I think I told you the last time that our company, or our local operation, did do work for all the divisions of the company. for the industrial, commercial, residential, aeronautical, ordnance, all of these divisions we had something to do with. We were selling each of the divisions something of our products. And instead of being able to diversify in this manner, the new corporation restructuring was going to the point where we were making each plant a part of one of those divisions and not one that could service all of the divisions like we had previously done.
Mm-hmm.
This meant a complete reorganization of the Wabash facility, getting rid of all the residential items we made, which were the things that our female production workers did, the small items for the home, humidity controls, and some thermostats, some damper motor controls for furnaces, for forced air heat, gas valves for radiators. And then we also did some commercial work in this area, small items, gas valves, up to 16 inches, I think, and this obviously was men's work, but all of these items had to go in order to make us a commercial facility of the corporation rather than an all-encompassing division of the corporation.
And still at the same time, you didn't feel that your job was in jeopardy at all, or?
Well, I think we all felt we didn't know from one week to the next whether we would be next on the list when you see people with 30 years go. Mm-hmm. And you have much less service than that, you don't know when you're going to be next. Mm-hmm. It was everybody was, must I say, a bit discouraged at this point in time. But many of us had too much to lose to leave of our own accord at this point in time. Yeah. With our length of service that we did have.
I've never heard really too much adverse comment from the ones that left. I'm sure there must have been someplace along the line.
I'm sure that some of them were quite bitter at the time. Yeah. Fortunately, most of them were able to find other employment in a very short length of time. And
the economy was rolling pretty good at that time.
If not immediately, yeah. Yes. And so I think that although they did lose a job for which they had been preparing for their future, through which they had been preparing for their future, which was a bad omen for the men who were in their 50s, in late 40s and 50s, and many of these people were. This is a bad time in life to try to get a new job.
I'll bet you were amazed at some of those that stayed. Yes. When you saw others leave.
Oh, yes.
I'll bet you were amazed at some of the ones that stayed.
That's true.
Yeah. That would be understandable also. Did things go fairly smoothly when what they refer to as the Freeport gang came, or not?
Well, at this point in time, I was in a department that by its very nature is more or less disassociated with the production part of the facility. And the only thing that touched us too greatly in the production and the ups and downs of the plant were the numerous layoffs and recalls that we had in this period of time. Something would happen and we recall a bunch of people, then that line would go down and we'd lay off a bunch of people. And this is the greatest impact it had on us, because as a department, our work basically continued. Regardless of the number of employees, the same services had to be provided, whether we had 5 employees or 500. The same services had to be provided. So ours was a fairly consistent or constant type of work. And so, and we were in an area rather remote from the operation, from the production operation. So it didn't, from that standpoint, affect us too greatly as individuals. But it was very discouraging to the others who were out in the production area, not knowing from one week to the next what was going to happen. Okay. It was like we were all on the outside and there were only a few on the inside, and nobody knew what was happening except the few on the inside.
Did the plant try to locate the ones that they were leaving out at this time in middle management, or that they were on their own?
I can't say because I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether they did or not.
I'm going over some of your notes here, and why don't you bring me up to date as to your recollection of the flood of spring of '59?
Well, usually by this time we had been located in the former 4-meter box building. For some time I did not mention that as one of the other locations previously, but we were making tank periscopes in this location as well as some of our smaller production items. And this was prior to the days of the flood control dams on the upper Wabash and Salmone and Mississippi rivers, and waters came up quite rapidly. So it was often and frequently that when the floodwaters came up, our equipment on the first floor of the 4-meter box plant had to be moved to the second floor. And one day the water came up so quickly that the girls had to leave the building by a board out the front door because the place was impassable. The water at that time would come up clear up to the Honeywell building. You could not go around the southwest corner of the building. The water would come clear up to that corner of the building. But we also had two other rather tragic things happen around the original plant, and that was we had two rather large fires. When I went to Honeywell in 1946, Mrs. Ireland operated a coal yard behind us, and the office of her coal yard was on South Miami Street, and the coal docks were along the railroad between Miami and Cass, and they were right directly behind the plant. And it was not unusual to see a railroad car filled with coal pulled up past a second-story window in our plant. It was quite intriguing to me as a youngster right out of school to see a railroad car at second-story level. But they would pull these cars up and then dump the coal in the bins below. But this caught on fire once while we were in the Canal Street plant, and caused a lot of problem for our building. Our men had to man the hoses and keep our building cooled down to keep it from, and we still had a lot of damage, a lot of broken windows and this sort of thing. And then the area that was formerly occupied by the coal docks was taken over by Honeywell and made into a parking lot, because prior to that time we had no parking area at all for the building. And then on the other side of the street there was also a fire in what we had formerly occupied in the Talbot building when Oswald Thomas had a tire recapping service in there. And this building went up in flame one day and cracked all the windows on the front side of our building. The files in our offices were so hot they couldn't even be touched. And we had things then, we were making government containers, missile containers for the government in the slumber buildings. And these all had to be taken out by our employees, and they were momentarily stored under the canopy at what is now the cleaners on the corner.
That was the biggest fire I ever remember in my short history in Wabash. Mm-hmm. How about, you mentioned having large tool room with tool crib with storage. Either been Bus Martin's area?
This is all a part of the change and the progress. I don't know what we want to call it, but it's when I went there we had an exceptionally large machine shop, and we had many men working in the machine shop. They covered one whole end of the building, one floor of the building, and we had punch presses that covered another end of the building in the basement, in the addition that was being built when I went there. Our tool room, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 20 tool and die makers when I first went to Honeywell, and Mr. Martin was the foreman of the tool room at that time. I think we now have at the outside 3 tool and die makers. Mm-hmm. We have no machine shop at all, and our assembly areas have changed considerably. Where we had a very small amount of sheet metal work when I went there, we now have I would say probably 70 to 75% of our business currently is sheet metal work. It's just a change of product and change. At one time when I went there, all of our engineering was handled by 2 engineers. Currently, although we're less now than we have been in the last few years, we have possibly somewhere around 25 engineers plus that many or more technicians. And it's just a change in product line that requires a different type of mix in the salary and hourly people.
What was the humidity room in the main plant?
The humidity room in the main plant was quite intriguing to me. It was clear down in the basement, and it was way back in a corner. And you had to go through several heavy doors to get there because the humidity room was what we called hair pulling. And they used human hair, which when I started in the purchasing department, we used to buy at $64 a pound. And it had to be hair that was at least 18 inches long. It had to be totally natural hair. It could not be ever have had a permit in it or anything of this nature. So basically it came from the Scandinavian countries and Holland. And this hair was imported. And because it is the best indicator of change in humidity, it stretches and expands and contracts, let's say, with humidity change. And so this is we had about 10 women at one time in a humidity hair pulling, what we called hair pulling room, and this was one of the focal points of a tour through our plant, was the hair pulling room, because they would take these large shanks of human hair and put them in a fixture and pull them out one hair at a time and put a clip on each hair strand. And then after they had so many strands together, depending on what humidity control they were making the element for, they would tie them at the top and the bottom, and they would be trimmed, and then they would be processed in what we call a wet box. And then these elements were assembled into a humidistat or a humidity control of some sort and taken to the humidity room in the basement, where the temperature and humidity was at all times controlled to the nth degree. And the temperature and humidity in that room year-round was constant, but it was kind of like going down into a dungeon to get into this room.
Who ran the humidity room? Who was in charge of it?
Well, one of our, at that time, I think Howard Williams had charge of humidity areas, and he ran both of them, the hair pulling operation on the second floor of the plant and the testing in the basement.
I understand that hair is still the best.
Yes, it is, but it's considerably higher priced now. The last time I heard it was well over $100 a pound compared to the $64 when I was purchasing.
How about your reflections of optomatic production?
This was a quite interesting product. It was apparently it had been in production for many years, and because of the use, the production was not large because it was used in a steel mill, basically to test the temperature in the, I don't know whether it was in the processing or where, but somewhere along the processing would check the temperature to see that the temperature remained constant while the steel was being processed from the molten metal into whatever form it was to go, whether it was sheet bar, stock, or whatever. And the optomatic was the instrument that was used by the steel mill to do this. And we had one man, and one man only, who kept the optomatic line running. And this then went out of the picture. And very recently, within the last year and a half, Honeywell came out with a new item, and they came up with the amazing name of optomatic. And I don't know what this item is, but it was altogether new, but it was in existence 27 years before.
Who was that in charge of optomatic?
Morris Magner worked on optomatics, and Kenneth Idle worked on optomatics many years ago.
Phil Magner refers to the optomatic production and how he had done some of the engineering and some of the field work.
This was before I had gone with Honeywell.
But I assume from what Phil said that it was an extremely complex and extremely difficult to keep the operation running to the satisfaction. I assume that's the reason they farmed it out. How about that service department that the plant had always maintained?
Well, we maintained service department primarily for the purpose of servicing the products for the home, the residential products. And these products, and as well as some smaller commercial products, we were obligated to maintain service on them for 10 years after the item went out of production. And so we had a quite sizable service department at one time, and any item, such as a thermostat off your wall, could be sent in and be repaired by our service department. Industry-wide now, almost. This is almost forgotten thing because you don't even send small appliances in anymore. It's almost as cheap to completely replace the thing, an iron or a toaster or anything like this. It's almost as cheap to throw them away and get a new one as it is to have them repaired. Now, I do not know, though. We did have a repair department that probably had 15 to 20 people in when I went to work there. It was a very active repair department.
This was Honeywell's theory that you kept a service department of serviceable goods for 10 years?
Right, for 10 years after the item went out of production.
Maintenance shop and night watchman.
We had a quite large maintenance shop, and their job was of a great magnitude in the building, the age of ours. Our building was very old, and consequently, every time they did something, it was a major project. And at that time, we had, this was when I first went to work, we had night watchmen who patrolled our building every hour on the hour after the plant was closed, and every weekend. Not during working hours, but when nobody was there. We had clock punching stations and this sort of thing.
Looking for?
Just plant protection, basically, is what
fire
it was. It's the same, fire, whatever, burglary or whatever, fire and malfunction of equipment, etc.
Let's end this part one. I'll turn the tape. How about the receiving docks back in the days when you started down
When
there?
I was in the purchasing department, obviously, we had a great deal of purchasing to do for the number of items that we had. With such a large number of items and so many of them requiring small parts, there was an awful lot of receiving done. And our receiving department was in the building that now houses Robin Hood's store. And so every semi that came along would park right out in the middle of Canal Street while it unloaded in our receiving. It would jackknife itself into our receiving door and unload whatever they had for us and then pull away. And I can imagine that type of thing happening today. I don't know what the downtown stores do at this point in time, but
Still probably parking in the middle of the street.
probably start parking in the middle of the street, that's right. And then we were finally able to move it to the rear of the plant after the coal docks burned. And we were able to move it to the west end of the plant, to the rear. And our shipping department was back there.
Did you join any of the social organizations at the plant?
There were no social organizations at the plant for females until possibly the last 10 or 12 years. And I had worked, there was only one that I had known of, and it was in Minneapolis. It was an organization similar to the men's veteran organization called the MNRAGs. But I knew there was an organization in Minneapolis called the Honeybells, and I had been corresponding with the president of Honeybells for several years, trying to have them give us a charter so we could start a chapter in Wabash, because we had a number of employees that we felt could qualify for membership, and we thought it might be kind of fun to do this. But it wasn't until the early 1960s we were able to accomplish this, when we finally went out and actually took a survey of the employees to see who would be interested. And we still have not been recognized by the Minneapolis group as such. We're not incorporated under their articles of incorporation, but we carry the same name. And I think since that time there has been another organization established, perhaps in the Chicago area, in Arlington Heights. I'm not positive. I have heard of one other, but I think we were probably the second one.
Do you belong?
Yes.
Yeah. And you also belong to the Quarter Century Club.
Yes.
Do you enjoy those meetings?
Well, I quite frankly enjoyed them a little bit more when I was on the planning end of them. As I was secretary to the manager of operations from the year 1953 until about I would guess 1965 or 6. I did most of the planning for the Quarter Century Club, making arrangements for the place, the program, and the meal, and all this sort of thing, sending the invitations. And this being right down my alley, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's not nearly so much of a joy to me to be a bystander.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm a member, obviously I'm entitled to go,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not as much of a joy to me as it was to be involved with the planning of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very enjoyable group of people, though.
You are obviously the only woman in Honeywell that has gone as high as you have, right? No one else in this plant is female.
Well, I could have said that possibly a year ago. I'm not sure I can say that now, because we do have females within our organization who are in other administrative positions, and we even have them in technical positions now.
In Wabash?
Yes.
And
we have one technical female, who is not supervisor, but work director for her department.
mm-hmm.
She is not the supervisor, but she does have the work direction for that department.
Do you think that possibly 25 years ago, women's rights and women's liberation and everything else, it might possibly have gone further than you had under the circumstances, which is pretty remarkable, I think, for a woman to go as high as you have?
Well, we had a couple pretty, at the time I went to work, Ms. Walrod, Mr. Honeywell's secretary, was office manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of stood in awe of her. She was kind of an inspiration to me because of her position. And I think once a girl finds out that she is going to work, that my own philosophy is that she should make the best of whatever she can do and go as far as she can go. And so this has been my it kind of typifies what I've tried to do over the years. Sometimes in today's business world, this is a little bit difficult with higher education.
Yes.
Because you are competing with those who have had college education and degrees, and this is not always the easiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Not that your experience doesn't count for anything, but I think that college education, if nothing more, gives a person a little bit more open mind, gives them a little bit more of an opportunity to think new things than the individual like myself, who has really worked hard to do what I've done to get where I've gotten.
But don't you think that had you been a man, you would have gone further than what a woman would have?
Possibly so.
Yeah.
I don't know really, but possibly so.
In
There still is, and I think always will be, a bit of a problem in this area. But I have no problem with this in my own mind, because I feel that had I a college education, that I would have no problem at all. I feel that with a college education I could compete with anybody in areas in which I had been trained.
Yeah. You're doing a pretty good job without it.
Thank you.
How about, we'll wind this up here in a couple minutes. How do you spend your spare time from work?
Well, there isn't much of that. I'm lucky to be able to spend a couple nights a month at home. My spare time is spent, I'm an organist at my church, And so each Thursday we have choir rehearsal. I'm a Sunday school teacher of 4, 5, and 6-year-olds in my Sunday school, and I'm a sponsor of our senior high youth group, as well as I was the charter president of the National Secretaries Association locally, the Wanasega chapter of National Secretaries, and have been active in that since its inception in 1957. Have served as president, I think, 6 years of that period of time. I'm now a member of Altrusa, on the board of the Altrusa Club, a comparable business women's club to the Rotary Club. It's a classified organization. I also am on the board of the Wabash Valley Music Association, and have a couple other memberships. I'm a member of Honeybells, was president of that for 2 years. But I am a member of several other organizations which I cannot be active in because of my other commitments, yes. And then I have my home to take care of, and so.
Has, as you look back and you're relatively young, would you say that working at Honeywell has been what kind of?
Most of my years with Honeywell have been pleasurable years. I don't know of any other company with which I could have enjoyed my time as much. I have had exceptional people to work with for most of those years, and have had only 1 or 2 short periods of time that have been rather discouraging. But outside that, the people have been most helpful and have been most encouraging when I myself didn't have as much confidence as they had in me, and possibly they pushed me further than I would have gone had I been doing it on my own.
Marvel Walrod, a pretty good person to start working.
Yes, she was. For me, she was an exceptional person to work with. We have always gotten along very well, and she was an inspiration to me because I saw what she was doing, and I always envied the position that she held, because I felt that that type of a position would be one that I would have thoroughly enjoyed, working for the chairman of the board of a corporation of the size of ours, and taking care of all the things that she had to take care of in his, well, for example, the building the foundation, and his personal business, and plus this corporation business. She was an extremely competent person, and I think I learned much from her by just observation, if nothing else.
As we close the interview, what would any comments or personal observations on Mr. Honeywell himself, which is basically the purpose of our interview? And
yeah, from which we've kind of strayed.
Well, that's good, because we got a little history of everything else.
Mr. Honeywell had my greatest respect. He and my father had been friends for many years before I ever appeared in the Honeywell plant, and possibly because of this, I felt a little closer to him. But he also was an extremely understanding person, extremely interested in youth. He had many great plans for his building, some of which have been fulfilled, and some of which I doubt that ever will be fulfilled at this point in time, such as the gathering place he had hoped to provide for them, like a canteen area, in which he went to a great degree to decorate in their own school motif and all this sort of thing. This has all been wiped away at this point in time. From that standpoint, I feel that probably some of his dreams will never come true in the building as it presently stands. But he was an extremely kind man, an understanding person, and a perfectionist in no uncertain terms. Everything had to be right, and if what you did for him was not right, he was very nice about explaining what was the matter, and very patient about having it corrected. As an individual, I think he was very greatly misunderstood by the people in the community because he was a perfectionist. And I don't think that the people in the community at all appreciate what the man has done for us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe there's any other community this size anywhere that can boast of the facilities that we have because of him. And we see this, I think, every time someone from outside visits any one of our local service clubs or for any purpose. You can go to the building now on any given day or any given Sunday and notice the licenses around the building. They're from all over, everywhere in the state. Many meetings, such as the State Gladiolus Show, being held here for the number of years it was. The facility has to have something to do with Wabash, as out of the way as we are being selected as the place for these kind of things to happen. Mm-hmm. Many other organizations take advantage of our facilities because they can find nothing else, anywhere else comparable. And the things that we have because of him, I think, are a great attribute to the community, and are some of the first things that I show people when they come to the town, because they don't believe that a town this size could have these sort of things.
Do you think that the community should have taken some initiative and named a school or a street or a park or something after Mr. Honeywell rather than he making the facility and putting the name on and so forth? Do you think that some interest should have been generated?
He really didn't put the name on for his own purpose. I mean, to exemplify himself.
No, I
It
realize
was basically there because of his parents and his wife.
Yes.
And the pool was named not by him, but by community people, the foundation. The country club does not carry his name. The gardens do. Rightly so, I believe, because it is and was his property. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he would have sought any recognition of any sort. He was doing this out of the goodness of his heart. I don't think that he was the kind of a man who would have wanted any great recognition or any great amount of glorification for what he was doing. It was done because he wanted to better his community. This was his home, and he wanted to do things for the people of his community. And I think this is perhaps it is a sad thing that we have not done something of this nature, but perhaps we have not because there already are so many things bearing his name. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it's because people did not appreciate exactly what the man did, because they say he had it and to give, and so what? There are many other things he could have done with it, except leave it in his hometown community.
Well, I'm thinking of Hershey, Pennsylvania, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this has been real interesting, and I want to thank you for taking your time for 2 sessions, not 1 session. And I know the tape recorder works, and thanks again, Jane, for very pleasant 2 afternoons.
Oh, okay.
This is George Dingleby, interviewer.